Welcome back to Shocking Stories, where we expose the most mind-bending true crime cases that will make you question everything you think you know about love, trust, and reality itself. Today, we're diving into a case that rocked Silicon Valley and exposed the dark side of online romance. This is the story of Marcus Chen, a brilliant tech CEO who built a multi-million-dollar empire only to watch it crumble at the hands of a woman who loved him, supported him, and promised to spend her life with him. The only problem? She never existed. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because what you're about to hear will shatter your faith in digital relationships forever. Marcus Chen was living the American dream. At 34, he was the founder and CEO of Dataflow Solutions, a cutting-edge artificial intelligence company based in Palo Alto that he had built from the ground up. With an estimated net worth of $47 million, a penthouse apartment overlooking San Francisco Bay, and a reputation as one of Silicon Valley's rising stars, Marcus seemed to have everything a man could want. But despite his professional success, there was one thing missing from his life: love. Marcus was brilliant with computers, but hopeless with people, recalled his business partner and best friend David Liu during a later interview with investigators. He could debug the most complex code in minutes, but put him in a room with an attractive woman and he'd freeze up completely. He was so focused on building his company that he never learned how to build relationships. This social awkwardness, combined with the demanding schedule of running a startup, had left Marcus isolated and lonely, despite being surrounded by success. It was in this vulnerable state that Marcus, in February 2023, decided to try online dating. He created profiles on several apps and websites, hoping that the digital medium would allow him to connect with someone without the pressure of face-to-face interaction. "I figured if I could build relationships with venture capitalists and clients through email and video calls, I could probably manage to date someone the same way," Marcus later told FBI investigators. "I was more comfortable behind a screen anyway." That's when he met Elena Rodriguez. Her profile appeared on exclusivedating.com, an expensive matchmaking site that catered to successful professionals. Elena's photos showed a stunning 29-year-old woman with long dark hair, warm brown eyes, and a smile that seemed to light up every picture. According to her profile, she was a successful marketing executive living in Barcelona, Spain, who had moved there from Los Angeles after completing her MBA at Stanford. She spoke 4 languages, loved classical music and modern art, and was looking for an intelligent, successful man who values both ambition and kindness. Their first conversation was electric. Elena had seen Marcus's profile and messaged him first, complimenting his company's innovative approach to machine learning. "Most men on here just want to talk about themselves," she wrote in her initial message. "But your work actually interests me. I've been following Dataflow's progress in the tech journals. What you're doing with predictive analytics could revolutionize entire industries." Marcus was immediately impressed. Here was a woman who not only understood his work, but was genuinely excited about it. Their digital courtship began slowly but intensely. They exchanged long emails discussing everything from business strategy to philosophy, shared photos of their daily lives, and soon graduated to video calls. Elena's English was perfect, with just a hint of a Spanish accent that Marcus found charming. She was everything he had dreamed of: intelligent, beautiful, ambitious, and genuinely interested in him as a person, not just his money. As their relationship deepened over the spring and summer of 2023, Elena began sharing more personal details about her life. She told Marcus about her difficult childhood in Mexico before her family immigrated to the United States when she was 12. She described her struggles to succeed in the male-dominated world of international marketing and her dream of eventually starting her own consulting firm. She sent him photos from her travels for work, business meetings in London, client dinners in Dubai, marketing conferences in Tokyo. By June 2023, they were talking every day, often for hours at a time. Elena would call Marcus during his lunch breaks, and he would video chat with her late at night after she finished her workday in Barcelona. Their conversations ranged from deeply philosophical discussions about the future of technology to intimate confessions about their fears and dreams. Marcus found himself falling deeply in love with a woman he had never met in person. "She was my best friend, my confidant, my everything," Marcus later told investigators, his voice breaking. "I had never connected with anyone the way I connected with Eleanor. She understood me in ways that no one else ever had. I trusted her completely." This trust would prove to be his downfall. The first red flag came in July when Eleanor mentioned that she was facing a temporary cash flow problem with her consulting business. A major client in Germany had delayed payment on a large project, leaving her unable to cover her office rent and employee salaries. She was embarrassed to ask, but wondered if Marcus might be able to help with a short-term loan. "I know it's awkward to discuss money," she wrote in an email that seemed to agonize over every word. "But I don't have anyone else to turn to. My family doesn't understand my business, and the banks here are so bureaucratic. It would just be for a few weeks until the German payment comes through." Marcus didn't hesitate. He wired $50,000 to Eleanor's Spanish bank account without a second thought. "When someone you love is in trouble, you help them," he reasoned. "I had the money, and Eleanor was the woman I planned to marry. What's mine would soon be hers anyway." Eleanor was effusively grateful, promising to pay him back as soon as her client's payment arrived, and their relationship seemed to grow even stronger. But the German client's payment was delayed again. Then Eleanor's laptop was stolen while she was traveling, and she needed money to replace it and recover her lost data. A few weeks later, her mother in Los Angeles was diagnosed with cancer and needed expensive treatment that wasn't covered by insurance. Each crisis seemed genuine, and each was accompanied by emotional video calls where Eleanor would break down in tears, apologizing for being a burden and promising that this would be the last time she would need help. By October 2023, Marcus had sent Eleanor a total of $1.2 million. When his accountant questioned the large international wire transfers, Marcus brushed off his concerns. "Eleanor's going through a rough patch," he explained. "Once we're married and her business stabilizes, everything will be fine." He was so deep in the relationship that he couldn't see the pattern of manipulation that was destroying his financial future. The crisis that would ultimately expose the truth began in November when Eleanor called Marcus in a state of panic. Her business partner in Barcelona had been arrested on fraud charges, and the Spanish authorities had frozen all of the company's accounts pending investigation. Eleanor wasn't involved in the alleged fraud, but she was guilty by association and couldn't access any of her money. Worse, she claimed that some of the frozen funds belonged to clients, and if she couldn't return their money within 2 weeks, she would face criminal charges herself. "I need $5 million, Eleanor sobbed during a video call that would later be analyzed by FBI investigators. "I know it's a lot, but it's literally a matter of my freedom. If I can't return this money, I'll go to prison for crimes I didn't commit. Please, Marcus, you're the only person who can save me." The desperation in her voice was heartbreaking, and Marcus felt like he had no choice but to help the woman he loved. But $5 million was more than Marcus had in liquid assets. To raise the money, he would need to sell stock in his own company and liquidate his investment portfolio. It was a devastating financial blow that would leave him significantly weakened, but Marcus convinced himself it was worth it to save Eleanor's life and freedom. "I would rather be broke and with Eleanor than rich and alone," he told himself as he signed the papers to sell 40% of his stake in Dataflow Solutions. The money was wired to a Swiss bank account that Eleanor said belonged to her lawyer, who would handle the client restitution process. Eleanor promised that once the legal issues were resolved, she would be able to access her own frozen funds and pay Marcus back. More importantly, she said, she would finally be free to visit him in California. They began making plans for her to fly to San Francisco in December, where they would spend Christmas together and finally meet in person. Marcus was euphoric. After nearly a year of long-distance romance, he would finally be able to hold the woman he loved, He booked a suite at the Four Seasons, made reservations at the finest restaurants in the city, and even bought an engagement ring, planning to propose on Christmas Eve. He told everyone who would listen that his girlfriend was finally coming to visit, and his employees at Dataflow noticed a spring in his step that they hadn't seen in months. But December came and went without Eleanor's visit. First, she said her passport had been delayed due to the ongoing legal investigation. Then she claimed she had contracted COVID and couldn't travel until she recovered. Each delay was accompanied by tearful apologies and promises that she would make it up to him. Marcus was disappointed but understanding, telling himself that these setbacks were temporary and that true love was worth waiting for. The truth began to unravel on January 15, 2024, when Marcus received a phone call that changed everything. David Liu, his business partner, had been contacted by someone claiming to be Elena Rodriguez. The caller said she was concerned about Marcus, who had been sending her large sums of money and making increasingly erratic business decisions. She wanted to meet with David to discuss staging an intervention. Something didn't feel right about the call, David later told investigators. The woman's voice was different from what Marcus had described, more of an East Coast accent than Spanish. And some of the things she said about their relationship didn't match what Marcus had told me. I decided to do some digging before agreeing to meet with her. What David discovered during his investigation would shatter Marcus's world and expose one of the most sophisticated romance scams in FBI history. Every photo Eleanor had sent, every story she had told, every tear she had shed during their video calls, it was all an elaborate lie designed to drain Marcus of his fortune. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. According to Spanish authorities, international banking records, and even Stanford University's alumni database, Elena Rodriguez, the woman Marcus had been in love with for nearly a year, had never existed at all. Don't forget to like this video if you're as shocked as I am by this deception, and let me know in the comments if you've ever experienced something similar online. The investigation that followed would uncover a criminal network so sophisticated that it took federal agents months to understand how they had created such a convincing fictional person. Subscribe to make sure you don't miss part 2, where we'll reveal how law enforcement traced the digital breadcrumbs and uncovered the truth about who was really behind Eleanor's perfect lie. Welcome back to Shocking Stories. When we left off, Marcus Chen, the Silicon Valley CEO who had lost over $6 million to his online girlfriend Elena Rodriguez, was about to learn the most devastating truth of all. Elena had never existed. What followed was one of the most complex digital investigations in FBI history, as federal agents worked to unravel a web of deception so intricate that it challenged everything law enforcement thought they knew about online fraud. Detective Sarah Martinez of the Palo Alto Police Department was the first law enforcement officer to interview Marcus Chen. When Marcus walked into the station on January 18, 2024, Martinez initially assumed she was dealing with a standard romance scam case. "I see these all the time," Martinez later explained. "Lonely people fall for fake profiles, send money overseas, and then realize they've been conned. It's heartbreaking, but it's usually pretty straightforward to investigate." But as Marcus told his story, Martinez realized this case was different. The level of detail, the consistency of Eleanor's persona, and the sophisticated methods used to maintain the deception over nearly a year suggested something far more complex than a typical catfishing scheme. Most romance scammers are looking for quick hits, a few $1,000s before moving on to the next victim, Martinez observed. But whoever was behind Eleanor had invested almost a year in building this relationship. They were playing a very long game. Martinez immediately contacted the FBI's cybercrime division, knowing that the international scope of the fraud and the sophisticated digital methods involved were beyond the resources of local police. Special Agent Jennifer Walsh, a specialist in international cyber fraud, took over the case and began what would become one of the most challenging investigations of her career. "When I first started looking into Elena Rodriguez, everything seemed legitimate," Agent Walsh later testified. "She had social media profiles going back years, business connections, even what appeared to be a credit history in Spain. Whoever created this identity had done an incredibly thorough job. But as Walsh dug deeper, cracks began to appear in Eleanor's perfect facade. The investigation began with the financial trail. Walsh traced the wire transfers that Marcus had sent to Eleanor's supposed Spanish bank account. The money had indeed gone to a bank in Barcelona, but it had been immediately transferred to a series of shell accounts in the Cayman Islands, Singapore, and Switzerland before disappearing into the digital ether. The money laundering operation was extremely sophisticated, Walsh noted. They were using the same techniques that major international criminal organizations use to hide their profits. Meanwhile, Walsh's team began analyzing Eleanor's digital footprint. They discovered that while Eleanor's social media profiles appeared to go back several years, they had actually been created using a technique called digital archaeology, creating fake historical posts and backdating them to make an account appear older than it actually was. The photos Eleanor had used were all stolen from a Spanish Instagram influencer named Isabella Morales, who was completely unaware that her images were being used to catfish victims around the world. The perpetrators had chosen their photo source very carefully, Walsh explained. Isabella Morales posted frequently, but mostly in Spanish, and she lived a lifestyle that was consistent with Eleanor's cover story: business trips, expensive restaurants, cultural events. They could curate Isabella's photos to create a convincing narrative about Eleanor's life. But the most sophisticated element of the deception was the video calls. Marcus had spoken with Eleanor face-to-face dozens of times over video chat, so how could she not be real? The answer revealed a level of technological sophistication that shocked even experienced cybercrime investigators. They were using deepfake technology, Walsh discovered. They had created a digital avatar of Eleanor using Isabella Morales' photos and videos, then used real-time deepfake software to animate that avatar during video calls with Marcus. The person actually speaking to Marcus was reading from scripts, but their voice was being altered to sound feminine, and their image was being replaced with Eleanor's artificial face. The technology required to pull off this deception was expensive and sophisticated, suggesting that the perpetrators were part of a well-funded criminal organization rather than individual scammers working from internet cafes. Walsh's investigation revealed that the same techniques had been used to target other wealthy professionals across the United States, with total losses estimated at over $50 million. As the investigation progressed, Walsh uncovered more details about how Marcus had been selected and targeted. This wasn't random, she realized. They had specifically researched Marcus and identified him as an ideal victim. They knew he was wealthy, single, socially awkward, and vulnerable to this type of manipulation. The scammers had used public information about Marcus's company, his social media posts, and even his quotes in tech industry publications to build a psychological profile and craft Eleanor's persona to appeal specifically to him. Eleanor's interests, her personality, even her backstory were all designed to be irresistible to Marcus, Walsh explained. They knew he was passionate about technology and artificial intelligence, so Eleanor was knowledgeable about those topics. They knew he was lonely and had trust issues, so Eleanor was patient and understanding. They knew he was successful but insecure about his social skills, so Eleanor made him feel like the most fascinating person in the world. The investigation took a crucial turn when Walsh discovered that the phone number Eleanor had used to call Marcus was registered to a telecommunications company in Romania. Working with international partners, Walsh traced the calls to a sophisticated operation based in Bucharest, where a team of scammers was running multiple romance fraud schemes simultaneously. They had essentially created a romance scam factory, Walsh described. They had dozens of fake identities, both male and female, that they used to target victims around the world. They had writers who specialized in creating emotional, convincing messages. They had researchers who would background check potential victims. They had technical specialists who handled the deepfake technology and money laundering. The Romanian operation was led by a 32-year-old computer programmer named Alexandru Popescu, who had previously worked for legitimate tech companies before turning to cybercrime. Popescu and his team had refined romance scamming into a precise science, using psychological manipulation techniques and cutting-edge technology to drain victims of millions of dollars. Popescu understood that traditional romance scams were becoming less effective because people were becoming more aware of them, Walsh explained. So, he invested in technology and training to make his scams more convincing. He was essentially running the Amazon of romance fraud, scalable, efficient, and devastatingly effective. When Romanian authorities raided Popescu's operation in March 2024, they found a sophisticated criminal enterprise that was targeting hundreds of victims simultaneously. The scammers worked in shifts to maintain relationships across different time zones, with detailed files on each victim's psychology, financial situation, and emotional vulnerabilities. They had playbooks for different types of relationships and crisis scenarios, allowing them to improvise convincing emergencies that would prompt victims to send money. They had turned heartbreak into a business model, Walsh observed. They were calculating the exact amount of emotional investment required to extract maximum financial returns from each victim. It was systematic emotional abuse on an industrial scale. The evidence seized from the Romanian operation revealed the full scope of Marcus's victimization. The scammers had been planning to extract even more money from him before moving on to a new victim. They had prepared additional crisis scenarios: Eleanor's supposed arrest, a kidnapping attempt, medical emergencies, each designed to prompt Marcus to liquidate more assets and send additional funds. Marcus was lucky that his business partner intervened when he did, Walsh noted. The scammers were just getting started. They had plans to take him for every penny he had, and then probably would have convinced him to take out loans to send them even more money. The psychological profile of Marcus that the scammers had created was disturbingly accurate and detailed. They knew about his childhood, his business struggles, his relationship with his parents, even his favorite foods and movies. They had used all of this information to make Eleanor the perfect girlfriend, someone who shared his interests, understood his challenges, and made him feel valued and loved. The level of psychological manipulation was extraordinary, said Dr. Robert Kim, a forensic psychologist who analyzed the case. They had essentially hacked Marcus's emotional operating system. They knew exactly which buttons to push to make him fall in love, to make him trust, and to make him send money. It was emotional engineering at the highest level. But perhaps the most disturbing discovery was that Marcus wasn't even Alexandru Popescu's most valuable victim. The Romanian operation had successfully extracted over $15 million from a real estate developer in Texas, $8 million from a doctor in New York, and smaller amounts from dozens of other professionals across the United States and Europe. These weren't desperate, gullible people, Walsh emphasized. These were intelligent, successful individuals who were targeted specifically because of their wealth and status. The scammers understood that educated, accomplished people often make the best victims because they're confident in their ability to assess situations and make good decisions. That confidence made them less likely to seek outside opinions before sending large sums of money. The investigation also revealed how the scammers had managed to maintain their deception for so long. They used advanced social engineering techniques to explain away inconsistencies in their stories, sophisticated technical methods to hide their true locations, and careful psychological manipulation to keep victims emotionally invested even when logical red flags appeared. They had answers for everything, Marcus later told investigators. When I asked why Eleanor couldn't visit, she had legal troubles. When I asked why she needed money, she had business problems. When I asked to meet her family or friends, she had privacy concerns. Every question I raised, she had a reasonable explanation that made me feel like I was being paranoid or untrusting. The Romanian authorities' investigation revealed that Popescu's operation had been active for over 5 years, constantly evolving and improving their techniques based on what worked and what didn't. They studied their failures as carefully as their successes, using each interaction with victims to refine their approach for future scams. As Part 2 of our investigation concludes, federal agents were preparing to extradite Alexandru Popescu and his top associates to the United States to face charges of wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. But even with the criminal network exposed, the damage to Marcus Chen and other victims was already done. The question remained, how do you rebuild your life after discovering that the person you love most never existed at all? In Part 3, we'll explore the aftermath of the Elena Rodriguez deception, including Marcus's struggle to recover financially and emotionally from the scam. We'll also examine how this case led to new law enforcement techniques for investigating romance fraud and what warning signs people should watch for to protect themselves from similar scams. Like this video if you're shocked by the sophisticated technology used in this scam, and comment to let me know if you think you would have fallen for Elena's deception. Don't forget to subscribe and share this video to help others learn about the dangers of online romance fraud. The conclusion of Marcus's story will reveal how he fought back against his scammers and what he learned about love, trust, and deception in the digital age. Welcome back to the shocking conclusion of our investigation into the Elena Rodriguez deception. When we left off, Romanian authorities had arrested Alexandru Popescu and dismantled his sophisticated romance fraud operation. But the damage to Marcus Chen and hundreds of other victims had already been done. What happened next would test Marcus's resilience and reveal how someone rebuilds their life after discovering that their greatest love was nothing more than an elaborate lie. The arrest of Alexandru Popescu and his associates in March 2024 should have brought Marcus Chen closure, but instead, it left him facing an even more devastating reality. During a video conference call with FBI agent Jennifer Walsh, Marcus learned the full scope of how he had been manipulated and deceived. The revelation that Elena had never existed, that every video call had been a digitally generated lie, and that his deepest emotions had been weaponized against him, sent Marcus into a psychological spiral that would take months to overcome. I couldn't trust my own memories, Marcus later told his therapist, Dr. Lisa Patterson. Every conversation I thought I'd had with Elena, every laugh we'd shared, every moment of intimacy, it was all fake. I felt like I was losing my mind, questioning everything I thought I knew about reality. If I could be so completely fooled about someone I talked to every day for a year, how could I trust anything or anyone ever again? The financial damage was catastrophic, but not insurmountable. Marcus had lost $6.2 million to the scam, including $5 million from the sale of his company stock and $1.2 million from his personal accounts. While the money was significant, Marcus still retained majority control of Dataflow Solutions, and the company continued to be profitable. But the psychological trauma was far more severe than the financial loss. Marcus went into a deep depression, recalled his business partner David Liu. He stopped coming to the office, stopped returning phone calls, even stopped eating regularly. He kept saying that he felt like the stupidest person alive, that everyone must be laughing at him behind his back. He was brilliant enough to build a multi-million-dollar company from scratch, but he'd been completely fooled by a lie. The media attention surrounding the case made Marcus's recovery even more difficult. Tech industry publications picked up the story, and Marcus found himself portrayed as either a tragic victim or a cautionary tale about the dangers of online dating. Some coverage was sympathetic, but other reports suggested that someone with Marcus's technical background should have been more suspicious of Elena's claims. The victim blaming was terrible, said Dr. Robert Kim, the forensic psychologist who studied the case. People seemed to think that because Marcus was intelligent and successful, he should have been immune to this type of manipulation. But that's not how emotional manipulation works. Intelligence doesn't protect you from loneliness, insecurity, or the basic human need for connection. If anything, the scammers targeted Marcus specifically because of his intelligence, knowing that smart people often overthink themselves into believing elaborate lies. Meanwhile, the international investigation into Popescu's criminal network was revealing new details about the sophistication of the operation. Forensic analysis of the seized computers showed that the Romanian scammers had used artificial intelligence to analyze their conversations with victims, identifying emotional triggers and optimizing their responses for maximum psychological impact. They had essentially created an AI-powered emotional manipulation machine, Agent Walsh explained. They fed all of their previous successful conversations into machine learning algorithms that could predict which messages would be most effective with different types of victims. They were using the same technology that dating apps use to create matches, but they were using it to identify vulnerabilities and exploit them. The investigation also revealed that Elena Rodriguez was just one of dozens of fictional identities created by Popescu's team. They had male and female personas designed to appeal to different demographics: wealthy widows, lonely divorcees, successful professionals, even military personnel. Each identity had its own backstory, social media history, and crisis scenarios designed to extract money from victims. It was like a factory for manufacturing fake people, Walsh observed. They had templates for creating convincing identities, databases of stolen photos to use for profiles, and scripts for different relationship scenarios. They could spin up a new fake person in a matter of days and have them ready to start targeting victims. The legal proceedings against Popescu and his associates became a landmark case in international cybercrime prosecution. The Romanian authorities agreed to extradite the main conspirators to the United States, where they face federal charges of wire fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, and identity theft. The case was complicated by the fact that many of the technical aspects of the crime, deep fake technology, AI-powered manipulation, international money laundering, were relatively new areas for federal prosecutors. We had to educate judges and juries about technologies that most people had never heard of, said Assistant U.S. Attorney Maria Santos, who prosecuted the case. We had to explain how someone could have a video conversation with a person who didn't exist, how artificial intelligence could be used to manipulate emotions, and how international cryptocurrency transactions could be used to launder money. It was like prosecuting a science fiction movie. The trial began in September 2024 and lasted for 6 weeks. Marcus was the prosecution's star witness, and his testimony was both compelling and heartbreaking. He walked the jury through his relationship with Elena, showing them emails, photos, and even recorded video calls that demonstrated how convincing the deception had been. "I'm not here to make excuses for my gullibility," Marcus told the jury during his testimony. "I'm here to show you how sophisticated and cruel these criminals were. They didn't just steal my money, they weaponized my capacity for love against me. They turned my deepest emotions into a tool for theft. That's not just fraud, it's psychological torture." The defense attorneys for Popescu and his associates tried to argue that their clients were merely providing a service to lonely people, creating fantasy relationships that gave victims companionship and emotional satisfaction. They suggested that the victims were paying for entertainment, like watching a movie or reading a novel, and that the financial exchanges were voluntary. That argument was both insulting and absurd, Prosecutor Santos responded. The defendants weren't providing entertainment. They were conducting systematic emotional abuse for financial gain. They studied their victims' psychology, exploited their vulnerabilities, and extracted money through deception and manipulation. There's nothing voluntary about being lied to and psychologically manipulated. The jury agreed. After just 8 hours of deliberation, they found Alexandru Popescu guilty on all counts. His associates received similar verdicts, and the sentences were severe. Popescu received 25 years in federal prison, while his top lieutenants received sentences ranging from 10 to 20 years. The judge called the operation one of the most sophisticated and cruel criminal enterprises she had ever encountered. These defendants turned human emotion into a commodity, Judge Patricia Williams said during sentencing. They industrialized heartbreak and weaponized loneliness. The harm they caused goes far beyond financial loss. They have damaged their victims' ability to trust, to love, and to connect with other human beings. That is a form of violence that deserves significant punishment. But even with the criminals behind bars, Marcus's recovery was far from over. He had spent months in therapy, working to process the trauma of discovering that his most meaningful relationship had been a complete fabrication. Dr. Patterson helped him understand that his experience was not a reflection of his intelligence or judgment, but rather the result of sophisticated psychological manipulation by professional criminals. Marcus had to learn to separate his rational mind from his emotional experience, Dr. Patterson explained. Intellectually, he understood that he had been the victim of a crime, but emotionally, he still felt responsible for being fooled. He had to work through feelings of shame, embarrassment, and self-doubt before he could begin to trust himself and others again. The recovery process was gradual and difficult. Marcus had to rebuild his relationship with his business, his friends, and his family, all of whom had watched him fall apart during the Elena deception. He also had to confront his own relationship patterns and understand why he had been vulnerable to this type of manipulation in the first place. I realized that I had been so focused on building my company that I had never learned how to build genuine relationships, Marcus reflected during a later interview. I was emotionally immature and desperately lonely, which made me an ideal target for someone like Elena. The scam forced me to confront some uncomfortable truths about myself and my life. Marcus also became an advocate for other romance fraud victims, working with law enforcement and victim advocacy groups to raise awareness about these types of scams. He discovered that the shame and isolation he had experienced were common among victims, many of whom blamed themselves for being deceived and were reluctant to seek help or report the crimes. There's this myth that only stupid or desperate people fall for romance scams, Marcus said during a speaking engagement at a cybersecurity conference. But the reality is that these criminals are professionals who use sophisticated psychological techniques and advanced technology to manipulate their victims. They target successful, intelligent people specifically because those individuals have the financial resources to make the scam profitable. The Elena Rodriguez case led to significant changes in how law enforcement investigates romance fraud. The FBI established new protocols for international cooperation in cybercrime cases, developed new techniques for analyzing deepfake technology, and created specialized units to combat romance fraud. The case also prompted new legislation requiring dating sites and social media platforms to implement stronger identity verification procedures. The Marcus Chen case was a wake-up call for law enforcement, Agent Walsh explained. It showed us that romance fraud is evolving from simple catfishing schemes into sophisticated psychological warfare operations that use cutting-edge technology. We had to develop new investigative techniques and international partnerships to keep up with these criminals. The case also highlighted the need for better education about online safety and the warning signs of romance fraud. Experts developed new guidelines for people using dating sites and social media, emphasizing the importance of video calls, though the Elena case showed even those could be faked, meeting in person, and being suspicious of anyone who asks for money or refuses to meet face-to-face. The most important lesson from the Elena Rodriguez case is that if something seems too good to be true, it probably is, said Dr. Kim. Elena was literally designed to be Marcus's perfect woman. She shared all his interests, understood all his problems, and never disagreed with him about anything important. Real relationships involve conflict, compromise, and imperfection. Perfect relationships exist only in fantasies and scams. 3 years after the Elena deception was exposed, Marcus has largely rebuilt his life and his business. Dataflow Solutions has recovered from the financial disruption and continues to grow. And Marcus has slowly begun dating again, though he remains cautious about online relationships. He has also become a wealthy man again, as his company's value has increased significantly since the scam. I'm not the same person I was before Elena, Marcus reflected. In some ways, that's a good thing. I'm more emotionally aware, more connected to my friends and family, and more skeptical of perfect scenarios. I've learned that being vulnerable doesn't make you weak, and being deceived doesn't make you stupid. It just makes you human. The Elena Rodriguez case serves as a sobering reminder of how technology can be used to exploit our most basic human needs for connection and love. It also demonstrates the importance of skepticism, verification, and trusted advisors when navigating relationships in the digital age. Romance fraud is one of the cruelest crimes because it attacks the victim's capacity for love and trust, concluded Dr. Patterson. The financial damage can be recovered, but the emotional damage can last a lifetime. That's why cases like Elena Rodriguez are so important to publicize, not to shame the victims, but to educate potential victims about the sophisticated techniques that criminals are using to exploit human emotion. As we conclude this incredible investigation, remember that if you or someone you know is in an online relationship, especially one involving requests for money or reasons why you can't meet in person, trust your instincts and seek advice from friends, family, or law enforcement. Love should make you feel safe and supported, not anxious and isolated. If this case has moved you as much as it has moved us, please like this video and share it to help protect others from similar scams. Subscribe to Shocking Stories for more investigations that expose the dangers lurking in our digital world. And remember, in an age of deepfakes and digital deception, the most important thing you can trust is your own common sense. Marcus Chen's story reminds us that even in our hyper-connected world, genuine human connection requires presence, vulnerability, and time. The Elena Rodriguez who stole his fortune and broke his heart never existed, but the lesson she taught about the importance of real, authentic relationships will last forever.